You're all in the dark. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Ward, and I'm here today with Tom Bartlett. Tom is a patient who was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis a few years ago. Today, what we want to do is, I'm really glad that you're here. Tom is going to help us understand what it's like to be a patient with rare disease. And what I hope to do is to highlight those places where what we do with data, how we operate. I'll try to highlight those places where it's different in rare disease than in prevalent disease. So, Larry, why don't we start with how you came to be diagnosed?
Okay. Some of you may recognize me as well. I think this is my 15th year at Bio-IT World, but this is my new role, and I'm a patient. Before, I worked for a company, life science consulting company, trying to help others like you advance outcomes in science. And now I'm the result of that. So I am very proud to represent the patient community in the rare world. And so when I first came into this world, I was doing pretty good. I was doing a lot of things athletically. And part of that, I used to play a lot of tennis. And with that, I was playing in a match, and all of a sudden things weren't working. And I'm not sure if anybody in this room has ever been out there and you go to shovel some snow and it's not working, and you get your back that goes out. Well, it's similar to that, but now you're trying to figure out what just happened. And so with that, it didn't stop. I lost most of the coordination that I had. So I called my doctor, and they say, you should come in. And I actually was in New York at one of the accounts I used to work with, Langone Medical School. And I said, I'll be in a couple days. And so I went in there, and there was 4 people in the room. And if you ever walked into your doctor's office and there's 4 people there, it's usually not good. So as a result of that, and lots of questions and doing some tests, my PCP was aware enough to test me for myasthenia gravis, which is highly unusual. In the rare community, most patients go 7 years before being diagnosed. I knew something was wrong, but it wasn't until I walked into that room. And that was a life-changing moment. And so consequently, you're trying to figure out, how do I continue to live my life? And this was back in 2019, and I was still working. And then things just didn't work, your brain fog and a lot of other different things. So I ultimately had to step down from my position as head of global sales. And that was a big change. And so now, how do I sustain? So go ahead.
Thank you.
Yep.
That must have been quite a shocking experience.
Yes.
Did you know much about rare disease at the time?
Only from my experience here, but that was tangentially. I really knew nothing.
Right. So maybe we should start with a few facts for folks.
Okay.
In the US, a rare disease is defined by the number of patients who suffer from that disease. So a rare disease is defined as any disease with less than 200,000 patients. Around the rest of the world, it's often expressed a little bit differently, maybe 1 in 2,000 or 1 in 2,500 of the population. To put that into context, I think we said, Cindy, that there's 2,700 people at this conference. Statistically speaking, Tom, you're the only person here who is likely to have myasthenia gravis. But the thing is, there are many rare diseases. In fact, there are thousands, 7,000, 10,000. Every year, the number goes up.
Mhm.
Collectively, there are, it's estimated 1 in 10 of the population in the US either has or will have a rare disease. That's 30 million people. That means if you look around you, there are going to be 270 people at this conference on average who might have a rare disease. So the magnitude of the problem is huge, even though for each disease, the numbers of people are really quite small.
Right.
So could you tell us a little bit about what it's like to actually have myasthenia gravis?
It's awful. There's no better way to describe it. It affects your neuromuscular systems. So when your brain fires a chemical to say, go do something, there are receptors on your muscles and to receive that chemical to go do that. My body, my immune system kills those receptors on my muscles. So the communication doesn't reach the muscle itself. It's not killing every single one. So what you end up feeling is degraded in terms of your capabilities. And you can hear my voice. My voice will continue to degrade throughout the evening when I'm speaking. Now imagine that with my legs. Imagine that with my eyes. Imagine that with my arms. And it affects all your voluntary muscles. There are a number of people who are using wheelchairs. I just started using the walking stick about 4 months ago because I need that extra stability. And ultimately, it's progressive. There's no cure. There are treatments, and we're very lucky for the treatments. And when you live with a rare disease, you find luck in a lot of places. And the people in this world that work so hard to advance outcomes in science, we're lucky for you folks for what you do. But with MG, walking up and down stairs, I have to plan everything. So if I'm going to go out, I have to plan ahead of time where I'm going to go, the amount of time, and most important, I have to plan recovery. So if I'm out for 4 hours like today, I will have to have a 4-hour on average recovery time so that my body can take the time to replenish. And if I try to work full time, that would mean I would sleep in 24 hours a day. So it doesn't work. The math doesn't work. But it is really difficult once you are diagnosed and trying to figure out what you want to do. The way it impacts the body, it is very, very traumatic, emotionally and physically.
I imagine.
Yep.
Tell me, what happens when you see your physician? How often do you go?
Yeah.
What kinds of things happen in the office?
Yeah, that's a great question. It doesn't matter how often you see your physician when you're going to get your annual checkup. I get to see my neurologist twice a year. And I am extraordinarily lucky here in Boston because I have one of the world's best in myasthenia. But twice a year, I get to see her. We do an evaluation. And part of that evaluation is actually paper and pencil. So I fill out a form and I hand it back. She adds up the numbers, and it's called an activities for daily living. And I'm a 13. 13 is bad. And I've been a 13 for 7 years. So we're trying to figure out how to improve that. But that's what we go through when we speak to our care, our neurologists and those who care for us.
And I notice you have an Apple Watch.
I do, yes.
And you use that?
I do. And the transition from collecting data in a analog way to moving to a digital way, there is a lot that goes on in that. And since I worked in technology, I worked for Apple for almost 20 years, I was looking at, why am I using a piece of paper to track? So now I would use my own devices. And part of that was 9:30 at night, I'm laying in the bed and my phone comes up with a warning. And the warning was, you have a high probability of falling. And I'm like, well, that's not good. And I called my neurologist and I said, hey, I got this message. And her response is, there's nothing I can do with that because it's not clinical data. So it's like, okay, so how do we change that? I'm not one who says, okay, and forget about it. I'm one who says, okay, how do we change, improve, and then go out and discover all these technology companies and research institutions and say, all right, how do we prove the patient experience with the data that we can collect, and at the same time work with companies and legislation so that we can include real world data and real world evidence and compare that along the way with the clinical data and get a much broader picture for the patient and the clinician.
So I would say that Tom's experience here is quite common. The information, the ADL, will be entered into your patient record, your health record, but probably in the notes. It's structured data, but it ends up in the notes.
Right.
Why? Because this is a rare disease, and EPIC is focused on billing, and there is no structured module to accommodate those kind of data.
Yep.
I imagine also that you're part of patient registries.
Yes.
So there's data there, the wearables. So here we have maybe not a terribly uncommon situation where there is unstructured data, even though it could have been structured, multimodal, from multiple different places just for one patient. Now, add to that, any given physician, and as you said, you're in a center of excellence, so that center will have quite a few patients as things go.
Yep.
But there is no one center that has enough data for anybody to really learn that much from. So the data has to come from many places, many centers, and actually many geographies. So we often will try to aggregate data from Europe as well as different states and all the rest of it. So context becomes really important here. Standards of care are not the same all over the world. They may not even be quite the same state to state, even though they're supposed to be. So it becomes absolutely crucial here. And this is a difference, I think, from prevalent disorders. You need a really rich and deep ontology, a really rich phenotype to be able to capture. And you need to be able to also have the context for what those data mean in the context in which they're derived. That's not the only challenge, though, with these kinds of data. Tommy, do you know other myasthenia gravis patients?
I know many, and that's because of my involvement in the communities out there.
And do they have people you know? Is their patient journey similar to yours?
No. No, there is a uniqueness because of the variables in the way the disease presents itself. So we are not all alike. There's not just one indication that says you have this.
So take that on board. What we're seeing here is heterogeneity in how the disease progresses. This is not unusual or peculiar to myasthenia gravis. This is actually a feature of many, if not all, rare disease. And think about what that means. You already have relatively few patients. Imagine you're trying to design a clinical trial. You've got patients perhaps who are fluctuating. You're really looking for probably patients who are slowly declining, but there are patients who have intermittent remissions. And at the beginning of your trial, you don't really know what's going to happen through the duration of your trial. So with that mix, you're going to have a very noisy trial. Your variance could be extremely high. Now, of course, that's a problem with lots of prevalent disorders as well. And the way we normally fix it is you just kind of throw bodies at it. You run a bigger trial.
Right.
But this is rare disease, and you don't have that opportunity. You have to be smarter about it. So the key, what we found is that the key to being able to control, or at least account for, a portion of that variance that comes from the nature of the beast, the heterogeneity, is to analyze and really understand the trajectory of the disease. So if you can find prognostic factors that you can account for in your clinical trial, you will increase the power. You will de-risk that clinical trial, which is crucial. So a thing that we need is analyses that can focus on trajectories, not just single point in time. I think we're going to be talking more about real-world disease in a few moments. But I would say that real-world disease is foundational. It is the block upon which everything else is built in real-world data, in rare disease. And the quality of the data is directly proportional to what you can do with it. The regulators set a very high bar. It's really crucial that provenance is there, that it's really, really clear how the context is around. So we're going to put another piece of the puzzle here in a moment, but first, is there anything you would like, Tom, to make sure that the audience walks away with?
Well, we had a discussion on this, and I'm just going to go back. Hope for a patient, and you can describe hope as any which way you want, but you need to have something that you can look forward to. Today, it's incurable, but I look at what the folks do in this world, and we will find ways to get to that end game and ultimately have a cure, or at least a high level quality of life. So that's what I live about, and I'm thrilled to be here again.
And to add to that, these challenges, they are real. They're real challenges, but the technology is there. What needs to happen is to think about it orthogonally and put the pieces together in a different way. So the promise of what can be is down to you guys.
Yeah.
Larry, it was an honor to do this conversation.
This is cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I've worked with Tom for, what, 25 years? Known Susan for 15 anyway. Allie, Cindy. So I've been anticipating and preparing for this event for like 6 months. I've talked with Seb dozens of times. And over that time, I've come to know how passionate he is about rare disease research. So if you would please introduce yourself to this audience and share that passion with them.
Okay, sounds good. So Sébastien Lefebvre. So yeah, I spent the last 10 years on and off in different capacity in the rare disease space. It all started with when I joined Alexion, and we work closely with Boston Children, the Menton Center, work with Rady's Institute in San Diego, RareX, Global Gene, and so that's been the work. My focus is basically what we call digital decision support. So what it means is data-driven and AI-assisted, support decisions. And an example of that is when we started to work on the platform called Rare Answers, which is basically a clinical decision support for rare disease diagnostic.
You can keep going, but you got to hold the microphone closer. You got to hold the microphone closer to your mouth.
All right. So what have we? So basically, what have we learned? Over the last 10 years, with working with Rare Answers in different capacity. Well, it started with let's count those rare diseases. We heard, from Susan, 7,000, 10,000. So we embarked in a report that we did in 2022 with RareX. And essentially, we looked at Orphanet, the European Clinical Network of Rare Disease, and then the US equivalent, well, maybe not equivalent, but the US version, which is called OMIM with John Hopkins. And of course, there's NORD involved in this and all on, but we relied on OMIM and Orphanet. And it was a big data cleaning and normalization task. But if you look at it from a precision medicine standpoint, where you say we count every single case, every gene, every condition, Fanconi anemia, 20 genes, that doesn't matter. It's one gene at a time. So when you do this math, and we have the methodology, and it's on the RareX website, you get to about 12,000. And so that's a lot. And out of the 12,000, there's 87%, let's say 80% of them have genetic underpinning. That's one thing. And 80% of that also, and this was 2022, we had at least 3 phenotypes, so descriptions, lab results, or symptoms associated with the condition. So theoretically speaking, 80% of these 12,000, if they're in genetic underpinning plus some phenotypic, we can start helping out from a digital standpoint, AI-assisted, data-driven with the diagnostic. And so that was the first learning that we did. That was the first report. The second learning, and that was a shocker. It's personal as well. We'll talk about this in a sec, but is diagnostic. I mean, it all starts with diagnostic. If you don't know what you got, how can you fix it, right? So diagnostic is the number one. And that work started with the Rady Sendio children in 2017, where we basically look at the genomic interpretation and the symptomatic lab result, that kind of stuff, phenotypic analysis of your condition. We actually, at the time, now it's with AI and machine learning, it's so much easier, but back in the days, was a bit less, which is extracting your phenotype from your medical record. And you extract it to match what? And so we use the human phenotypic, HPO, human phenotypic ontology. So that was our reference set, so to speak, to map against the patient. So if you take the genomic and the phenotypic, you get essentially a signature. And then you can compare that signature to the 12,000. Right. Obviously, you're not going to get a good hit because a lot of those have no phenotype, nothing associated with them, but still. And we got with Rady a world record. So at the time it was 19 hours from blood sample to interpretation and diagnostic. It's been beaten since others have done it. The other learning, I'm doing David Letterman here with my cards, but essentially for those who remember the guy, but this approach and folks in, I'm going to butcher this, but Jiaotong University in Shanghai, AI researchers, they basically use an agentic framework now. And this February, they published a paper. And when I read it, I was like, yes, they just rebuilt Rare Answers using agentic. So that was good to see. So basically, the advancement of AI, and they've got better results. So advancement of AI clearly will help emphasize that. The next step, and what's the last learning, is you can get diagnosed. Then what? A lot of treatment options are not necessarily like blockbuster drugs, right? Some of those are therapies, some of those are diet change. And what we did is we worked with Rady again, and we said, let's mine the literature. Let's look at all these cases, right? All these publications, and pull out what evidence we can find about every cases about these gene condition combination. Turns out Rady ended up with 500 gene condition, and they have treatment option. So, and they're not publicly available, not everyone knows about them, but that gene to treatment, the GTRX knowledge base, has turned out to be, quite useful for that. In one cases, I need to describe it, and it explains the diagnostic piece, which is a kid, a young girl, Sebastiana, within the first day of being born, she was seizing, could not eat, obviously failing. And so admitted to Rady's, and they did the whole genome, found a variant in KCNQ2. At the time, they were putting it on a standard. They were putting her on a standard seizure medication, and due to this diagnostic, switched to basically a sodium channel blocker. So change the treatment back. Condition stabilized. Kid is normal now. I mean, you can read her story on Rady's, and there are many other stories on the Rady's website. But this is why we're doing this.
Yep, it's a very compelling story. So it seems like the main problem is diagnostics. So why should we solve this?
Well, let's start personally. So I've been through different diagnostic journey, and nothing severe, but still. And I was shocked. I was shocked how simple my case was and why it took so many years, right? And then I look at my family, same story. I look at my friends, and I'm sure everyone in this room have similar stories where either themselves, family members, oh, I thought I had this, and and then turns out I had that. And misdiagnostic happened with common disease as well. So it's a broad issue. But for rare disease, it's a massive issue, and there's no reason for it. We're proving it, right? If a kid in an ICU can be diagnosed and treated under 14 hours, so that was the other thing. I think it was during COVID time. I think we did with Rady another example of rare answers, essentially, where blood sample to diagnostic to treatment using GTRX, 14 hours. Starting treatment. So it doesn't need to take 7 years. One last thing, it saves lives. There are studies, baby bear, baby manatee in Florida, baby deer in Michigan, I believe. It's a bunch of studies that says in the NICU, early diagnostic with whole genome sequencing saves costs, so healthcare costs. And then the scientific understanding keeps evolving. So if you have your sequence, if you have your DNA sequence, we don't really know what you have. Give it a year, give it 2 years. Reinterpretation, makes a difference. But none of this starts if you don't have your own genome and your own data. So why don't we switch gears now?
Okay.
Let's go switch to you now and say, essentially, introduce yourself and what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so my name is Bill Vanetten. I've been to every Bio-IT World, except for the year I got COVID. The problem I'm trying to solve is commercial personal genomics creates a privacy problem. So you pay for your genome, and then they spam you with emails to get updated reports that you have to buy regularly. Your personal genome is out there. It's not like you can change a password or get a new credit card. Your genome becomes public. Commercial sequencing companies will tell you they have privacy first, but if they're selling you a report, they're reading your genome. So we're introducing an app. It's entered in Best of Show, an app on your iPhone where you can get a truly private genome, and I'll explain that a bit later. So I am a geneticist. I'm a bioinformaticist. I began working on the Human Genome Project, I don't know when, decades ago. And I got my whole genome sequenced maybe 6 years ago. And I was too busy to do anything with it because I was working on everybody else's stuff. So it sat on my laptop for like 6 years before I did anything. But I wound up thinking about, can we do this on your phone and provide that privately? So it used to be that we needed to centralize all the human genome data because you needed a lot of compute to perform the analysis on, but it's really not required anymore. So we decided to try to decentralize it, where your genome is on your phone. You can generate your own reports on your phone, and nobody has access to it but you.
How do you keep it private?
All right, so the technology is really already there. So he asked, how do you keep it private? So, coming off of the sequencer, as many of you probably know, you get a plate full of 96, 128 genomes and BCL files. So we transfer that directly to an AWS Nitro enclave, and it's demuxed, run through the GATK pipeline, and then your genome is encrypted with a public key from your phone, where only you with your phone can download it and read it. So it's kind of turning the industry kind of upside down. So we're doing this in collaboration with Bio-IT, a company I started 23 years ago. We're in booth 419. If you want to come see the application and vote for us, please. And we're doing this in collaboration with the UNH Hubbard Center for Genomic Studies. They're going to be performing the sequencing. So they'll take a plate full of genomes mixed together, BCL files, that goes up to the AWS Nitro enclave. It stays inside that enclave while the GATK pipeline runs till it generates your genome, encrypts your personal results with your phone's public key, so only you can download it and read it. And then from there, within the app, you can do a number of things, which I think I'm about to describe.
You've mentioned rare disease.
No, we're going to know the features first.
How you want to do features first?
Yeah. So the app has presently 4 different features. One is the first one is the kinship app, which is kind of clever. 2 people point their phones at each other, and they can determine their kinship through 6 degrees of separation. You can load in your own. There's 60 million people out there with 23andMe and Ancestry data. You can load that onto your phone, so you can bring your own genome, and that's totally sufficient for doing kinship analysis. Then other things are the Origins app, Origins feature, which I find fascinating. So my project in the human genome was coming up with the first 1.4 million SNPs. We found that all humans are far more closely related than we thought. But this will follow your paternal line using your Y chromosome or your maternal line through your mitochondrial DNA and track your ancestry over thousands of years from the original Out of Africa event. We're all related to the same 5,000-10,000 people from 50,000-70,000 years ago, and it'll track that for you. Another feature is, generating health reports. So it's using all the public genomic information so that you can, get a health report. And then we've also enabled natural language queries, so you can ask questions about your genome and have them answered through natural language. So then I think we're almost out of time, but you asked about rare disease.
Yeah. That's cool.
So we're also working on providing a way for rare disease researchers, people doing research studies, clinical trials. So if somebody has a particular disease, they can, flick a toggle switch on their phone to hold their hand up, say, I'm interested in participating in a research study or a clinical trial, and then enabling those researchers to ask questions about all the people on all of their phones, whether they fit for a particular cohort, but without sharing your information. So what you're sending is a question, your phone answers the question, and the question goes back to the study to help build cohorts for rare disease.
Thank you.
Oh, Fandango. Hello, me again. I forgot to shamelessly plug my talk that I'm giving tomorrow at noon in the bioinformatics track, if you want to hear more about that app that I mentioned before. So here I'm interviewing Dylan. So I became acquainted with Dylan when he invited me to give testimony in front of the New Hampshire House and Senate. I think he'll tell you stories about laws that we're putting in place that will hopefully accelerate rare disease research. So Dylan, what's your story? Who are you?
Yeah, so my name is Dylan Livingston. I'm the founder and CEO of the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives. So a little bit different of a world than the rare disease world, but it's all related. Our mission at A4LI is to promote legislation and policies that will extend healthy human lifespan. I got into this longevity world when I was about 12 years old. I just finished reading Harry Potter. And my dad went to a regenerative medicine conference and he said, Dylan, you got to check out this guy that I met. His name is Aubrey de Grey. And I encourage you all to Google this guy, Aubrey de Grey, on your phone. And you'll see what I saw as a 12-year-old. You'll see a long bearded British man talking about potions to reverse aging. And so I was completely hooked at 12 years old. Growing up, I didn't really think about aging that much. I was more interested in like who I was taking to prom and all that kind of stuff. But I got back into the field during COVID. I was working in politics at the time for the DNC and the Biden campaign. And my senior year of college was kind of wrapped up at an abrupt point, and I, was supposed to be celebrating my senior year of college, playing baseball, and then I found myself locked in a basement with my 92-year-old grandfather, and sitting in the basement for an extended period of time has you think. And I started thinking about COVID as it relates to age. Why me as a 22-year-old at the time would be pretty much completely unaffected by COVID, and why my grandfather at 92 would most likely die. And it all kind of comes back to aging, right? Your immune response to these diseases and your just immune response to general chronic diseases overall. And so I got back into the aging field sort of as a fanboy, kind of reading the books and the literature and the scientific papers. And then what I realized after I was done with Biden was that there was no advocacy for this longevity space. And so at the ripe age of 22, I decided to make that my life's mission. And here we are about 5 years later. In those couple years, we put together a congressional caucus in the House of Representatives. We grew it from 4 members to now over 10, which is very exciting. We have bipartisan buy-in from both the right and the left. And we've passed 2 laws in the state of Montana that extend eligibility under the Right to Try Act, which is what I'll be talking a little bit more about here in the context of rare diseases.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more about what Right to Try is, what you did in Montana, and what you hope to accomplish in New Hampshire.
Yeah, so Right to Try is a federal piece of legislation that was enacted by the Trump administration about 10 years ago that basically says if you have a terminal illness, you have the right to try a therapeutic that is not yet fully approved. And that's a no-brainer, right? If you are out of options and time is not on your side, you should be able to take your medical journey into your own hands and make decisions that you think are best for you. The issue with Right to Try is 2 things. One, the definition of who is eligible is very narrow. It's terminal illness is something like 6 months left to live. which made no sense to me when I read it for the first time, because people who are just being diagnosed with something like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something along those lines should also have the right to try earlier in the process, hopefully to achieve a better outcome. So that's one reason why the federal right to try hasn't really been used so much. And the other reason is there's no coverage for providers, for physicians, for manufacturers. And so it kind of became a liability nightmare, and no one really wanted to play. And what that led to were hundreds of thousands, millions of patients that weren't getting the potential access to care that they sought. So what we did in Montana, oh, and then I guess I'll step back a little bit too. When I entered the field of longevity, I saw a lot of people go abroad to get treatments. They would go to, some sketchy place in Tijuana or Honduras or Antigua or whatever. And that made absolutely no sense to me for two reasons. One, we want to ensure these patients have the best standard of care, especially when they're doing something that's inherently risky. My mom hates when I say this, but when I started going out and kind of partying in high school, my mom would say, Dylan, don't, if you're going to go drink, don't drink in the woods somewhere or by the beach where something bad could happen. Do it in a safe environment, right? I think the same kind of mindset applies here. If you're going to do something inherently risky, do it in the safest environment possible. But then also by going to these clinics abroad, we lose the potential data collection that would be very beneficial to clinical trials and informing investors to make the best decisions. So what we did was we changed the law in Montana to allow all patients the right to try, no matter your health status. And now we are pushing that same piece of legislation in New Hampshire, not actually because we're pushing it, but because the New Hampshire state government passed a law last year, HB 701, which strengthened some of those liability concerns. They ultimately wanted to be the state that was leading the way in right to try. And so it was amazing for me to see, because it was kind of getting back to the fundamentals of America, where state competition is driving innovation. And so right now in New Hampshire, we are currently in a battle to get those two bills passed. It has passed the House pretty easily. In the Senate, there's some, I wouldn't say barriers or roadblocks, but there are some concerns. And so we're currently battling that right now.
So maybe I missed it, but did you mention expanding the right to try beyond terminal patients?
Yes, and so that's what we did in that's what I was mentioning before. What we did in Montana was expand it to all patients, right? No matter what your health status is. And we did that with those longevity people in mind. If they're going to go and get a gene therapy and they're otherwise healthy and they're going to do it in Honduras, they might as well do it here. But what it opens it up for also is people with rare diseases, people who are just diagnosed with a terminal disease where they can't, or a disease that will become terminal, that under the existing framework don't have access. And so we passed that in Montana in 2023, and then that's HB 1734 in New Hampshire right now.
So this expands it to people that are, chronically ill or severely debilitated illness.
Yes.
And also mention, as I recall, the bill included, it had to be prescribed by 2 physicians and go through an IRB board.
Yes, and so that's one. We'll talk about that in a second. But there's obviously there's a fight in the New Hampshire Senate right now, and one of the pushback points is we don't want to kind of open things up and make this the Wild West. It already is kind of the Wild West. If you have a certain amount of money, you can go do whatever you want wherever you want. But what we're trying to do is create a system that is safe enough to prevent as many tragedies as possible, while also opening up access to as many people as possible, because there is inaction is also bad, right? It also is ultimately something that kills people. And we have to weigh as a society, do we want to gatekeep some of these therapeutics that could ultimately benefit millions of people in the name of safety or not?
All right. So describe for me some use cases for right to try and why is it good?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give you I'll give you one example of a case I'm dealing with right now. So I was reached out to by someone whose son just passed away from a rare mitochondrial disease. And then he sequenced his other 2 kids and realized they both had the same mitochondrial mutation, and they were on the same track to passing away as well. Obviously, the father is completely freaked out and wants to do everything he can to prevent that from happening. And what Montana's model offers is 2 things. One, well, really one thing, it bypasses the strictness of the clinical trial requirements, right? A lot of clinical trials are, for a specific subsect of the population, and you might not qualify. And then even if you get into that clinical trial, you may or may not be in the placebo group. And in this person's case, he said, to hell with the clinical trial data. I want my kid to have the drug, right? I mean, who wouldn't say that? And so, maybe it's not as great in terms of a data collection, standpoint for companies, but what we're offering here is options for people that don't have any other options.
Great, thank you. So now describe some of the counter arguments. I know when we gave testimony, some of the committee members were giving us a hard time. Like, describe some of the other side.
Yeah, well, just to go on record, I disagree with all of them. One of them is that these therapeutics in general are just going to be for the rich because there is a price tag associated with them, and that's that's the case for every emerging technology, right? GLPs were not available to everybody 5 years ago, and now they are. The iPhone, the car, you name the invention, and that has started with a certain group of the population that had the economic means, and then it always trickles down as democratization happens. And so, yes, there is that aspect of it, but what we did in the Montana and the New Hampshire bill was add a caveat to ultimately make this accessible to people of a lower socioeconomic status. So all of these treatment centers will be taxed 2% per year, and that will go into a pool for people that may not have the means to access these therapeutics themselves, but want to. What's another one? We were thinking about these before.
Yeah. So the other one is, there's fear that people might be pushed into treatment. Physicians might want to, peddle, or pharmacies might want to peddle to get more research.
Yeah. The fact that these drugs are already in an FDA trial. So all of these drugs, just to clarify, have to have passed phase 1 to be applicable for whoever's going to take them. And so the fact that they are in this clinical trial pathway kind of shakes out the snake oil. Most of the snake oil salesmen I see are pushing supplements. To all of you supplement people out there, I'm sorry, but that's usually where they lie. No company really wants to just stop at phase 1 because the market for who is able to actually access these treatments is so small, and no insurer will come in and cover any of these therapeutics if it hasn't gone through a full phase 1, 2, and 3. So I don't really see that as an issue. I understand why people are concerned about it, but I think the 2 reasons I laid out kind of shake out all the bad actors.
So I live in New Hampshire.
You do?
Starfleet Bio is a New Hampshire company.
Yep.
So I don't want to. I would like New Hampshire to steal some of Cambridge's
Sure.
people, research.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I was talking about this before, right? The FDA has been around for what, 60, 70 years. It's a monopoly on who is able to access therapeutics and who is not. And I'm not up here being an anti-FDA crusader, but we are seeing this in the rare disease space today with Unicure, right? Where that's the whole FDA hubbub these days. And, Parkinson's patients are going to the FDA office because they disagree with the FDA's decision. And so, the innovation is going to come from the states competing against each other to create the best model for approving and giving access to these therapeutics. And I think the FDA can take some of the lessons that these states like New Hampshire and Montana are putting on the table. And it's actually not just New Hampshire and Montana. Florida and Utah, Wyoming have very progressive state right access regimes. And so it's exciting to see what was going on. When I was in my initial meeting in New Hampshire about 8 months ago, the sponsor of the bill, Steve Kesselring, got up and said, "We want to be the the leading state in this right to try push." And a tear came to my eye, because this is exactly what I intended when I started with Montana. We want the states to compete. We want innovation to come from the ground up, and we want to use that innovation to better inform FDA and federal policymakers.
And if I recall, the guy who sponsored the bill, and I don't know if this is true, but he estimated that it would double the GDP in New Hampshire. I don't know if that seems kind of crazy, but
I'll have to find the stats on that one. But
okay.
yeah, it sounds good. Triple.
Yeah, right. So in your experience in Montana, typically going through clinical trials, phase 1, phase 4 takes a decade. So can you speak about how this might speed things up a little bit?
Sure. So, we have gotten no indication from the FDA that they will accept data that comes from right to try bills or right to try regimes that we've put into place. But the way I see this is this will make investors a lot more informed in choosing which companies to back and which ones to not back. I always bring this example up. I don't know if any of you know this name, but David Sinclair from Harvard, he was pushing his company Certex. It was bought out by Amgen or one of those companies for like $700 million, and it ended up not working, right? And if we had data on that a little sooner, we might have been able to avoid putting $700 million into something that doesn't work and put it towards something that maybe is a little more useful. And by the way, I love David. I wouldn't be doing this without him. This is not a dig to him. But that's just the example that pops into my head. This will inform investors a lot earlier in the process about where to put money and where not to put money. And I think, I see a lot of companies right now struggling to get over the valley of death hump. And I think this will be a way to kind of fix that.
So we're almost out of time, and I've run out of my scripted questions. Are there any things that you would like to add before we close?
Well, as someone who runs their own conferences, I guess I'm glad I'm the last one, so I can say this. Let's give it up for the Bio-IT team. This is really quite the operation, right? How many rooms? This is incredible. I will also say that we are running our own conference at the end of June in Washington, D.C., our HSPAN Summit. We will have a number of legislative officials there, a lot of the longevity community there. It'll be at Georgetown University. We put out a special promo code. I'm sorry for shamelessly plugging my own conference, but I feel like I kind of have to. If you sign up with the code Bio-IT, you'll get a discount, and we'd love to see you all there.
Thanks, Dylan.